Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 8th of January. No surprise, we came right down to fill the positive extreme, as you can see down here. We have the one left, which is that magenta line going across at the 4660 range, but this is the primary fill that we look for right around the 4700. The low turned out to be 4702. Within a point of that open price there. So pretty reasonable. Doesn't mean that we still aren't going to move lower here. The upside for the bulls in this case was the rising steel. That was enough to keep things from breaking down. We expected to move towards that 76% anyway, just to soften the extreme nature of the move. A little more weakness than this one, where it just after the rise consolidated. But you start to get the positive numbers for employment and things like that, and it makes it a difficult case to justify Fed easing at this particular stage. So some of that narrative may have taken some steam out of the expected turnaround back to zero rates that the market was hoping for. When we look at our readings, MBI White Light still leads, not spiking at any particular point, but definitely ahead of magenta yellow here in this case, which are still falling, as well as DOC red and green. We're reaching that point though at minus 24, 22 to 24 range. You get a bit of a turnaround, and we'll see if that's able to play out. But really becomes a question of how fast and if orange DOC pivots back up. If it pivots back up for continuing an acceleration downward, you might get a little bit of a turnaround. When we look at it from those kind of terms, when we start those declines, the rising DOC orange, as it starts to fade, usually is the beginning of the end of that rally. But we've moved into negative shakeout territory. That's also added impetus for lower. The NQ, having filled this positive extreme, just like the S&P has one more to go. A little bit weaker because it filled completely below the bottom with that coming underneath, and still hovering right below its 76 range. And the readings from a DOC standpoint, very similar, just a little bit stronger from a DOC steel. So short-term buyers have been plying into that just to hold the line. Is it enough to keep it from going there? With this NQ below the 76, not necessarily. You could get more of a washout effect from there. From a treasury standpoint, of course, see that exuberance fading just a little bit. Not enough to get it in line with where current rates are at, but still expecting at this point some type of rate cut. But I think the expectations have been quelled a little bit. From an oil standpoint, it's still holding reasonably. We had some crude draws in that, which is a good indication that there's still economic activity happening, and that really just supports the case that things are maybe not great, but they're humming along to the point where there isn't anything that has red lights flashing or anything like that. Euro's still quite elevated given where it is. The ECB, they're not going to be able to make any move on their rates in that at this particular stage. But from a growth standpoint, the EU is pretty much in a dead zone at this particular stage. And gold suffering because lack of expectations for any kind of push of inflation. That could change rather rapidly, though, given geopolitical situation, Red Sea, and or if that expands. So some of those unknowns still remain and can cause disruption and push oil back. But short readings on that at this particular stage are still clear. And I know there's a lot of narratives. Gold should be, climbing, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. They don't really move the market. It's where the money is actually going, which we can see. And crypto still holding on to it. And of course, the expectation for a lot of people waiting for ETF approval and or the upcoming Bitcoin halving. So all of those things play for that scenario. You don't have that same news relative to ETH. It's been a little bit softer relative to that, but still quite elevated from those original breakout modes. Now, going back to when we first started following these ETFs and that, when it comes to Bitcoin, that wherever they created positive extremes, it may have taken some time, but they get felt. It's just a matter of waiting for the signals to come through. We can see these are previous positive extreme levels, the 21 and then also the 97. We got right to the 42. That's well within that 80% expectation of being filled. So did what it was supposed to do. It was a pretty decent rise, but once it got to the 50%, the turnaround of magenta back underneath and went to short mode from that particular state. We just saw, from a 50K standpoint, weakness here with the split of cyan, creating a very tight spider. Sometimes you get the large opening like this where green is over the cyan, but here it was very tight, the rejection, and that caused a nice little swoop down. This is getting bought up at this particular stage right now. And from a 5-minute chart intraday, when we look at it from Friday's action, it was a beautiful rise, flipped to short pretty darn quick there on a nice DOC spread. That's cyan over red and orange all the way up here. And stayed pretty elevated until we got down to that move, and that's exactly what I was talking about from the daily chart. We're up here with it. If it starts to make that move down, that's where we look for any pivots up to maintain the trend of weakness. And once it dipped, that was enough to give it a little push. Wasn't enough to hold it up. Came right back down, filled back in at the bottom, and then right at the end post-market, there was a nice little push to drive things up. In the pre-market here, we've seen some fairly decent selling there to get short any move, see how much volume there was below that, the lows from Friday's action. And once that happened, boom. You see, so there wasn't as much selling supply as others might have thought, and that's pushing things back up. So that's the long and the short of it. All good stuff. Pretty clean overall from a general reading. As always, though, trade well. If there's anything relevant, I will put on the Skype chat. Have a good one.